Eric, can we move on a little bit? I have a listener question I wanted to get to, and this is about the machines that make the chips. Um,
Mhm.
and I love this. I could watch automated factory all day long. I think it's the best entertainment. I didn't mention to you, but I got to tour an electric aircraft factory
Oh, cool.
last week, which was really cool, and see some of their custom machines making custom parts of this plane. And it's just watching robots make other things is just so cool and so fascinating. So I love this question. Let's get into this. It says, "Hi, Eric, Austin, and the 24/7 Wall Street team. Great episode. For those that are looking for more international exposure, what about Tokyo Electron at this time? I'm about to listen to the most recent Q&A, so apologies if this has already been discussed. You've talked about Tokyo Electron a few times, but let's answer it. Tell me about this company. What is the backstory here? What do they do?"
Yeah, we're all nerds here, so we can agree on this. Extreme
This is a
engineering
safe
is
space for
cool.
nerds.
It's great. So yeah, the background. I try and the industry is called semiconductor equipment, but I realize I use those words and I lose half the audience immediately. So we're gonna call them the machines that make the chips. There's a big five in this space of companies that dominate most of the revenue, control most of the value chain. That's ASML, which we've talked a lot about. Tokyo Electron, which we've mentioned, but probably talked a little less about. Lam Research, which we own. Applied Materials, which has probably the biggest breadth across the industry, and KLA 10 Core, which has kind of a dominant position in that market we talked about earlier of detecting defects in chips. So these stocks all saw excellent returns in the 2010s. A big reason behind that, we saw less severity in semiconductor cycles. It's a brutal industry that got shaken out and consolidated. And eventually, most of the parts of the value chain have only two or three primary companies competing. And, if you're one of the companies that builds the chips like a Taiwan Semiconductor or Intel, your relationships matter, and working with a smaller company introduces a lot of
100%.
risk. That's one of the interesting things. A lot of people say, I don't want to invest in semiconductors because it's brutally competitive. There's a lot of memories back from the 1980s and 90s. The reality of the situation is it was that way, but because it was so brutally competitive, almost every part shook down to an oligopoly or just a few companies,
Mhm.
and they were birthed in the flames, right? They had to come through this battle and survive to become generally lean and extremely competitive companies that are hard to be a startup and compete against. So we love the industry for that reason. It should be one of the biggest winners from AI. And yet, we don't have many recommendations in this market, despite the fact that it did so good in the past. In Austin, we've talked about the reasons why. But number one, customer concentration. We have very few of the leading fabrication companies that make chips because it's gotten so expensive, and very few companies have the expertise. And once again, one company is just so good at, and that's Taiwan Semiconductor. They've essentially run out of their competition out of town. The second part is that the number one way to engage in a trade war, if you're focusing on technology, is start at the beginning. Make sure that your competitor, which is China, doesn't have access to the ability to make chips. So these companies become essentially your negotiating tactic.
Mhm.
This introduces two problems. In the short term, sales turning on and off to China is going to create a lot of volatility. And in the long term, China has every incentive in the world to make their own domestic suppliers who will go out and compete on cheaper price and kind of ruin this oligopoly situation. All right, so that's a very long background setting up what this industry is. But what we saw recently in earnings, this was on Thursday, August 14th, was Applied Materials reported, and they issued very bad guidance. Their sales are declining year over year, and they cited two reasons for it. And it's exactly what we've been talking about since the beginning of this podcast. Number one, they are experiencing some pressures on their leading edge, their most advanced equipment. And that's because Taiwan Semiconductor has so much concentration, they can push these companies around more. And second, they're seeing volatility around Chinese orders. So this is also going to hurt Tokyo Electron, who this question was about. They had a pretty poor guidance themselves leading into 2016 earlier this season. And this is the reason we've cut our exposure in this market down to just two companies, and that's Lam Research, which it's down today, and that's purely because of Applied Materials. It's not something the company did, but they are the top performer in this market this year, along with KLA 10 core. And for KLA, we don't have them, but we have a smaller upstart in Camtech. So I would say, well, our returns haven't been great in the space. Lam Research has done fine. It's the best of the group. And Camtech, as we mentioned earlier, is down 16%. We have positioned ourselves as well as we could. And frankly, we could have gone a lot deeper in this market, and we've been lucky to avoid it. So I think, am I going to be adding Tokyo Electron? The answer is no. For all the reasons I've stated above, we will look to other opportunities.